You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. For this episode, I got to speak with Amanda Upson. Amanda is an attorney turned film producer whose first film, Magnum Opus, is now available on Amazon Prime. And much like Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, backwards and in heels, Amanda went through her whole education and law career without realizing she is nearly deaf. She tells us how she finally figured it out after years of reading lips and not realizing why her earbuds never worked. And speaking of which, this is our second try recording this because the first time her hearing aids did not play well with the recording and we have had to try again. So when we refer to earlier conversations, that's what we're talking about. You haven't missed an episode. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbay, and now on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever it is that you listen. And I want you to know we have refreshed the store and there are some very cool new products available, including a book for women who are pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant while holding down a job. It's called You'll Never Have a Baby in This Job Again, and it's about navigating pregnancy and childbirth discrimination in corporations. We talked to about 100 women who had had babies while working and heard all of their stories. We then compared those stories to the laws in place or not in place and came up with all the tools you need to protect yourself and have a successful pregnancy, maternity leave, and re-entry. Also, there's some t-shirts you're going to want to pick up before the Women's March. And since podcasting thrives by word of mouth, please tell all your friends about this show. Okay, here's Amanda. Amanda, I am so happy you have joined me on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are an attorney turned film producer, and you also introduced me to SheEO, and I want to talk about all of those things. But let's go back to you're an attorney. Let's talk about that career for a second.
Yeah, I was an employment defense attorney, which I think is a great area of law to practice. There's a never-ending supply of interesting fact patterns. The stuff people do at work is very entertaining.
I'm sure it is. So were you defending companies against claims from employees?
Yes, and helping companies come up with good HR practices, and helping them to review and audit their HR practices and keep them in regulatory compliance, and assisting with all sorts of claims and then things like trade secrets and, people using information that was the employer's confidential information, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you take us back to when you were in law school? Because part of your story is that you're completely, if not very close to being completely deaf and didn't realize it until you were an adult?
Yeah, I say I'm, among the deaf community, I very clearly say I'm hard of hearing, which is a clue that I have some residual hearing. But with hearing people, I say I'm mostly deaf or I have profound hearing loss, because if I say I'm hard of hearing to hearing people who talk to me, they misinterpret that I can actually hear them when a lot of times I can't. And I rely on a lot of cues like lip reading, knowing the context of the conversation, that sort of thing. And I hear predominantly vowel sounds, so I do a lot of plug and play. But I didn't realize it until a number of years ago when I transitioned out of law into producing because my work environment changed.
So were you doing mostly work via email?
I've always avoided the phone if possible. I just never really enjoyed talking on the phone. And I also, even before I knew this, I would let things roll into voicemail where I had a recording and I could replay it and, be sure that I was getting the message, or I had a wonderful admin that I miss every day that would transcribe stuff that came in. So I was really reliant on a lot of accommodation that I didn't know I was using as accommodation. So it was, it was a great surprise to me when I found out that I have very little hearing, only the really big sounds like jet engines in one ear. And then the assumption is that my good ear, which is a little bit better, it just continued to decline and got to the point that now it sort of craps out during the frequencies where people speak.
Oh, perfect.
So, the useful stuff that I need to hear, I don't always hear. And mostly with the hearing aids, it works out, but hearing aids aren't a perfect solution for anybody, that's got hearing aids knows it gets you part of the way there. It's just an accommodation like anything else.
Yeah, so you must be doing a lot of other mental gymnastics, keeping up with everything.
I am. I think I've always been a really great punster and have a quick ability to, come up with fun rhymes. And I think it's because my brain is always circulating through what potential words are. And it's just like, how I've always visualized it in my head, because I knew I was doing it even before I actually knew it was because I couldn't hear, is the old train stations. I don't know if they still have it because I haven't been on a Europe train in a long time, but they used to click through the destinations and the times, and every time you look up at the monitor at the train station, it was just flipping through stuff, and my brain sort of does that until I land on the thing that's right.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, at one point when we had first met, you told me a story about being in college and sitting in the front row and actually having an aid, and you still didn't realize that you couldn't hear. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I started college and was in a big lecture hall for one of my classes, and I had to go across grounds from one side to the other, and I could never make it early enough to grab a front row seat of the lecture hall in front of the professor. And I asked the professor if it was possible to save the seat, and he said, they can't save the seat unless you have a disability. And I thought, well, I don't have a disability, but I can't hear you. So what do I do? And I went to my advisor, the professor, somebody told me to go to disability services. And so I did, and I went through this whole battery of tests, and I came out with a guaranteed note taker, a reserved seat, and I thought I'd won the jackpot, because not only did I get a reserved seat, I got a note taker, which was, sort of amazing to me. And then I remember getting a note to go see an audiologist or a doctor, and I remember where it was located, because I was thinking in my head, okay, the bus doesn't really go there, and can I ride my bike, and how far is it? And then I just threw it away, because I was like, I'm congested. Nothing's wrong with my hearing, and how would I pay for it, and how would I get there? And I got my front row seat, and bonus, a note taker, but I felt my school had a really strong honor code, and I felt since then very guilty that maybe I violated the honor code by having that, because I didn't really need it. But I'm pretty sure in retrospect I would have failed out of school without it.
So you thought you were really getting away with something?
I thought that I was congested, and that I lucked into the note taker. And it was this major crutch for me, because I'd have massive blanks. Anytime a professor turns around, I would have no idea. When I went through law school, I sat next to my best friend who typed word for word what the professor was saying, and I was always sort of awed by him. Like, how could he tell what the professor was saying when his back was turned?
Now, the thing that cracks me up is that you had no idea. So at what point in your life did you get a diagnosis, and then the penny must have dropped, and you must have thought, oh, now my whole life makes sense?
How many years ago now? 4, 3? Gosh, I can't remember. It's after I turned 40, so I went through a significant period of my life without it, and the doctor told me, said, look, you're almost entirely deaf in one ear. And I said, no, I like that's ridiculous. Can you look again? I must have an ear infection. And he was like, no, you're like every 10-year-old who's ever come in here and sworn they don't have any hearing loss. Because I guess you don't know what you don't know. And I've used captions on TV since I figured out there were captions. My kids are the loudest people on the planet. Everybody's always telling them you don't have to yell. I'm like, well, kind of they do. And I don't know, when I practice law, it's a lot of reading and writing, and you have transcripts, and lots of things are recorded and you can replay, and it didn't occur to me. But when I got into the car after the doctor told me, and I was like, okay, I'm really busy. What do I need to do? Okay, I'll get hearing aids, whatever. And I got into my car, And I sat in my car and I thought, oh my God, this is why I've never had earbuds that work. I've never, and I,
like they're all defective.
I started crying because I stopped buying earbuds after about the 5th pair because I was like, Jesus, shoddy manufacturing. Why can I never get a pair that work? And I thought to myself, it never once occurred to you it was your ears. And how, and otherwise, you know, I'm otherwise intelligent enough to get along with my life, but that never occurred to me. And then I just sat in my car and cried because I, like, all of this stuff, never waking up to an alarm, you know, always having to have somebody shake me awake, not watching TV, never talking on the phone, like all of this stuff suddenly made sense. And, you know, every once in a while I get a flashback and I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably because I couldn't hear.
I think that is just amazing. And in spite of it, you went through law school, became a lawyer, have a successful career without even noticing. Like, I think that is just incredible.
And all along the way, apparently super focused, which is what my admin used to say, because she'd IM me that somebody was at the door. And everyone's like, oh, she's just really focused. I had no idea.
Okay, you don't know they're standing right in front of you because you didn't hear them walk in.
I didn't hear them knock. I didn't know somebody was staying, you know, unless I was looking at them. Unbreakable focus.
Yeah, what an advantage, actually. Okay, so at some point in your legal career, you thought, I'm going to go produce a movie. Talk about that transition.
Well, I thought at some point in my legal career, I thought I'm missing some creative element of my life, and I need to figure out how to fix that. And so there was a little bit of a process where I identified that, and then I identified what I wanted to do next, you know, because I thought the billable hour structure and the type of work in a law firm wasn't quite doing it for me. And I had great clients. I worked with great people. It was a lovely firm, but it wasn't quite the right fit. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I identified that I wanted to work with kind, brilliant people on a project from start to finish. And I thought that would likely result in me going in-house or working with a startup, but this producer kept coming up, and it came up 3 times, and finally the third time it came up, or the first time it came up, my husband, you know, I'm having sort of a midlife crisis. What do I do with myself? My husband said, oh, you should be a producer. And I thought I don't live in LA, and I don't know anything about the entertainment industry. And I said to him, that's the stupidest thing you've ever said to me. Why would you say that? Could you please provide helpful information? And he said, well, that's just your skill set. And
how did he know? Where do you live?
I don't know. We live in Colorado. I have no idea how he knew, because I didn't know what a producer did. I don't know how he knew what a producer did or where it came from. I got really mad at him. It was a terrible fight. I've apologized.
Because it turns out he was absolutely right.
He was right. And then it came up the second time, and I'm never quite sure what the second time is because I don't remember. It didn't register, but the third time it came up, I knew it was the third time. And I had started talking to a friend from college, not knowing he had worked on the side in the entertainment industry and wanted to become a director. And I started talking to him about setting up a company and trying to help triage some issues so he could do that efficiently when he went to talk to an attorney. And then he said he was setting up a production company, and he thought I'd be good at producing. And I was like, oh, this is the third time this has come up. And I, of course, said, you know what, any person who that sounds crazy to would say, I can't possibly do that. I don't know anything about that. What? Right. I can't. I didn't. And he said, yeah, I think this is your skill set. And he sent me a book, What a Producer Does. And I read it, and I thought, yeah, that kind of is my skill set. And, you know, I just decided to try it.
I think it's so important when you get those little hints. Like Oprah used to talk about, you get hints from the universe, and they get louder and louder. And
yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and you finally heard it. We're like, okay, I'm doing it.
Right, and I thought this is so crazy. I've heard this 3 times, but I had tacked up that kind, brilliant people on a project from start to finish, and that's what I was looking for. And I looked at it, and I thought, well, this is it. My business partner, Kevin Elliott, who directed the movie, as a friend from college, and I always thought he was exceedingly kind, and without question, one of the smartest people I know. And I went out, we talked about it a little bit, and I thought, okay, so I don't know, I'm not an expert in securities law. I don't know why I thought that would help, but I spent about 2 weeks cramming securities law because I thought if I need to know this. And then somehow I did that, and I thought, okay, I'm ready. I'll go out to AFM and see what this is about. And so I went to AFM, and I remember I was sitting next to Kevin, and I kept saying, what'd they say? What'd they say? Pre-hearing aids. But I thought, yeah, I think we can do this. And the biggest factor was that Kevin, when I hung out with Kevin for a few days at AFM, he was as kind as I remembered. And I thought, I'm crazy not to try this.
That's wonderful. So then did you raise money from investors before you started?
Yeah, it otherwise is the same as any widget. I mean, you go out and we use equity investment. And so I sort of thought at any, as I went through the process, I thought, okay, we could not find the script, or we could not find the money, or we could not find a casting director. And we kept, hitting those milestones, and it was pretty apparent that, not apparent, but I was kind of surprised every time I opened up a new folder on my computer for the next part of the project.
Because you just figured, this next step, surely it'll fall apart, and then it didn't.
Well, I'm more optimistic than that, but I'm also a realist. So I thought, okay, there's a good chance, if we, I had thought, okay, this is the script we can do at a budget that has a good chance of finding an audience. It sort of met my criteria. But I was also aware, okay, well, I haven't had anybody within the industry read it. And so there's a very good chance we don't get a casting director. We don't get cast because no one responds to it. But it turned out we got a casting director pretty quickly. And then Clark Johnson was represented by UTA, and we got great coverage there, and he signed on very quickly. And once he signed on, it was pretty easy to get the rest of the cast because he had agreed to do the movie. So I thought, wow, I was kind of surprised that we got through that hurdle. And just each time I'm like, I know it's going to be hard, and I'm going to do my best. And, if I don't make it, I at least made it this far, but I'll keep pushing.
And one thing leads to another.
Yeah. And when I started, I did my best to do research to have a really good idea of the big picture and what I needed to do. And then each time I get to the new phase, I do a lot of research to get a good idea of the big picture of that small thing. Mm-hmm. And then I try and execute on the small thing and then move on to the next thing. So at any given time, I'm totally unable to have a very involved discussion about the small task that I did 4 or 5 weeks ago, that I was so focused in and felt, very comfortable with my research, my knowledge then, but now I'm onto this new thing. So I just have to do a brain dump after everything to make room for the new stuff, because there's a bunch of stuff to know.
Yeah, but what you've proven is it's all figure-outable.
It is figure-outable.
Now,
if I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out.
I would give you a little more credit than that. So the name of your movie is Magnum Opus?
Yes.
And you found distribution.
We did.
Tell us what the movie is about and where it is.
Sure. Magnum Opus is a spy thriller that pits Desert Storm vet turned artist against U.S. intelligence, and secrets from his past lead to a hellish journey of spies' betrayal and government retribution. That's what I said over and over again at AFM. And we had our initial tagline had a lot more R's, and one of the hearing things that made sense is I had speech therapy for 9 to 10 years, and my R's aren't super solid, so we had to take those out because I couldn't deliver. I couldn't deliver, so we rewrote it to give my speech and abilities a chance to succeed. So yeah, we got distribution. And did you say what was that process like, or what was the question about distribution?
Oh, where is it? Where can people find it? And then talk about the process.
Yes. Right now it's streaming everywhere in the U.S. and Canada. It's on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play. It'll be on Amazon Prime on January 9th. So maybe by the time this is out, people can check it out there. And it's on a ton of other carriers. But those are the big ones that I think people usually go to. And internationally, I have a question into to our distributor asking them about that. It's sold in China very quickly. So if you're in China, you should be able to see it. And then otherwise, I have to get some remaining information on that.
Great. So have you been able to pay back your investors?
Well, not yet. The cycle of the money is there's a little bit of a lag time between when it sells and when you get the money in. So that part has not happened, but we are hopeful. I mitigated risk as much as possible.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, is this your full-time job now? Are you a film producer?
This is my full-time job. I still take pro bono clients. I represent, in this past year, I think I had 4, I might just have another one, 5 deaf and hard of hearing clients that I take on a pro bono basis through this nonprofit called CREEK, Civil Rights Enforcement Center. So I still do that just because I always have a call to service, and I feel like I have a very specialized skill set and I can provide service to people. So I do still do that, but it's more on my free time, and most of my time on a day-to-day basis is spent shepherding this movie through the process and trying to put it in the best position for everybody that took a chance on us. I mean, we had actors and crew and investors and everybody, distributors that went out on a limb with a first-time team, and I want to make sure, I feel like I owe a duty to them, so I have to make sure that I see this through to the end so that we find our audience and the movie has a nice, happy life.
For sure, and then that helps you with your next one. Do you have your next project lined up?
I have a bunch of options. I'm not sure which one is the right one yet, and I don't know. I'm putting off trying to decide. I want to get this movie a little bit more situated with the audience, and I have some contractual obligations I need to sort out. But I don't know, I think I counted maybe before our last one. I have 10 scripts or ideas that are in some stage of development, and I need to figure out which one of those looks good. And then I'm very interested in trying to build a media company. And so I'd like to sit down and, spreadsheet that and try and figure out how to do that.
Fantastic. Now, at one point you told me a story about how some distributor told you had to have a white guy with a gun in your film.
Yes. Well, he told everybody in the producers forum. But yeah, that you would never get international distribution unless you had an old white guy with a gun. And I thought, well, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a black guy with a gun if that's the case. I mean, like it's silly. And part of when, I did this, and Kevin and Scott Stoddard, our scriptwriter, we were all on board. Diversity in casting was very important to us, and we wanted to make sure that we had a film that was more interestingly cast than just, the 4 or 5 names that we repeatedly heard we needed to get distribution.
Mm-hmm. Good. So you proved them wrong.
Yeah, well, we have, good old Clark Johnson. I mean, he's amazing, and he was great to work with, and, I adore him, and I'm so happy that he signed on early, and that's
great. Now, you introduced me to the organization called SheEO, and I interviewed the founder also for the podcast.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was the most exciting meeting I had been to. But could you just talk about that for a minute? Because this is your second year doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my second year. I signed up They launched in Denver. It was the second city and the first U.S. Market they launched in. And I saw Vicki at a friend's house, and I signed on almost immediately because she articulated a way to fix the thing that I knew was broken that I hadn't heard anybody else offering a solution to fix. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. I thought that she was a good person to lead the effort, and I wanted to sign on and support it early on, and I supported it again this year. And thank you very much for having her on your podcast and getting out word about CEO to other people.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't not do it. And for anyone who hasn't heard that, this is for venture capital for women, and maybe you can explain the model real quick.
Yeah, sure. It's so the problem is that less than 4% of venture capital goes to women-led businesses, and less than 1% of corporate procurement goes to women. And that's clearly, given how much of the population we make up, that's wrong. And there's no reason why that should be the case. It's sort of a deplorable status, in my estimation. And when I look around at our businesses and the current politics and some of the situation that we're in the U.S., it seems like we'd all be not just women, but the entire population would be in a better position if women were represented equally in business and invested in equally in business. And so I feel like the current model that our economy is running on is broken because it's resulting in very few people accumulating and retaining most of the globe's wealth, while the rest of the people don't have it. And sort of how do you fix that economic model? And I'm not an economist, and I would have failed accounting or economics without my handy-dandy note taker. But Vicki is, and she was. And so she's come up with this idea where she has women. She doesn't say invest because it's more of a debt structure, but she calls it radical generosity because you basically give it to the fund. And so women give $1,100 to a fund that is a perpetual fund. They loan money to women-led businesses as a no-interest loan. And so in the U.S., they pick 5 businesses. All of these women-led businesses apply. They pick 5 businesses, and then the 5 businesses split up the fund amongst themselves. It's set up as debt, so the money is loaned out. It's repaid very quickly because the women-led businesses tend to perform really well. They pay back their debt. It goes back into the perpetual fund and then gets loaned out again to future businesses. And so the thing that Vicki always points out is that 80% of purchasing decisions are made by women. And if women aligned their buying decisions to companies that create a better world, we've literally changed the world overnight.
Yeah, for sure. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so I want to support those businesses so we have more women-led businesses. And the result is things like Callisto, which is, changing the reporting for sexual assault. They're active on schools and colleges have purchased them, and they work with them, and I think they're moving out a new model into the private sector, which will be a great help for reporting sexual harassment.
Mm-hmm.
I think SAG needs that, and the entertainment industry needs that. So
I think every industry needs it.
Yeah, so it kind of changes, instead of having women, which, my experience from my previous job and from knowing friends, when a lot of times when women encounter sexual harassment in the workplace, they would rather just leave and find a different employer than deal with it because they know a lot of times they're not believed or such and such. And I think it's even harder. So if you're a educated white woman, you might be able to leave and get another job a little bit easier, but it's even harder if you're a minority woman. And so we have underemployment for this huge, massive part of the population that could be if they were employed to their full potential, we could have a whole different structure.
Yeah, and it becomes so risky to rock the boat and report things that shouldn't be happening.
Right, and Callisto avoids that because what it does is it avoids that first person to step forward scenario. Because you put the data in, it logs it, and then it flags it once there's somebody else. So you avoid having...
So it's an app?
It is data-driven technology. So I don't know if it's an app. I'm, again, not a computer scientist. I just think the model is brilliant and not something we would have had if we were relying on male VC firm to fund it.
Oh, for sure. So it collects data of, say, here's a guy that several different women are complaining about. So now you have data that here's an issue and it's a pattern and it's a problem.
So for universities, if they have, you know, an organization that's getting repeated complaints, they can go into that organization and fix it or, you know, try and figure out what the deal is. But I mean, I think you know, hopefully they'll roll it out into the private sector and, you know, get the system in place that works. But I can see something like that being very valuable to a corporate entity when you have turnover within the corporate entity and, you know, this open secret of everybody knows this, you know, not to get in the elevator with this person, but no one does anything about it. And I think part of the problem is you don't have organizational memory, or you're working in a workplace that has, where it's project-based, and so you're repeatedly turning over people, like film production, you know, where it's a little bit harder. And so I think those kinds of businesses are very valuable for improving not just, you know, if you reduce sexual harassment, you can increase the women who are staying in the business.
Which changes everything. And it's funny because every couple of years there's some report that comes out of why there aren't high-ranking women in business. And it's always, well, they've decided to leave, and we guess that it's because of family responsibilities or children. But when they dig deeper and actually ask those women, it's so often the workplace was hostile, and they were tired of beating their head against the wall and decided to go do something else.
Right. Right. It's the same in law. It's the same in corporate business.
Everything.
Yeah, I think it's the same everywhere. But the upside of it is that we now have a lot of women who are starting businesses, and I hope with supportive CEO, and then there are some other VC firms that are equity investment platforms that are growing to support women-led business, that will have a little bit of a change in the economy. So if we get those women-led businesses in place, things will start to shift. But I'm going to keep supporting CEO as much as I can.
Yeah, and I've started to see a bunch of women like crowdfunding or venture capital. And it feels like if we just get enough women in the room, it's really going to change the culture.
Yeah.
With the whole Me Too of it all, what are your feelings on that? Are you seeing this as a real change afoot? Do you think this is going to be different?
Well, I hope so. I mean, there's a problem. We all know there's a problem. I hope that this has been an impetus to change so that we can not have a problem and we can all benefit from it and improve, you know, workplace and productivity and workplace culture and that sort of thing. There's part of me that hesitates because I really do like I like the courts to make decisions. You know, it makes me a little bit nervous to have a social media movement that results in somebody losing their employment because it doesn't really involve as much evidence gathering or impartial jury. But at the same time, it also encourages entities to maybe go back and check their records and go talk to people. And I don't know how much employer action is reactionary to social media and the Me Too movement, and how much of it is, we know the evidence is there and we do need to take action on this. So I don't know which way it is. I'm glad to see that there's change. And I like people to support our legal system and go through that. But part of me says whatever it takes.
Yeah, I had a very similar initial reaction, like when the Kevin Spacey thing happened. There was one tweet, and suddenly House of Cards was canceled. I was like, hold on, let's give that a minute. But then when you dig deeper, there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than we saw on Twitter. I think that social media makes it transparent and accountable, so that the companies who do have the information are then kind of forced to take the steps they need to take, because now everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Because I too am uncomfortable with a person loses a career and 250 people lose their jobs because of one tweet. That doesn't seem right. I think we need to be much more responsible than that if it's going to be a sustainable movement that enacts real change.
Yeah, and I think, what I trust is that the HR departments and the lawyers advising the HR departments are going around and doing their due diligence to collect the information and making an informed decision and not being reactionary to social media. And I will just trust that everybody is doing their jobs. I feel like I'm glad people are talking about it. The thing that is so crazy to me are all the men in my life who said, how is this still a problem? And all the women in my life that were like,
how do you not know?
How do you not know? I complained about this then. I complained about this time. And the guys sort of looked dumbfounded, and they're like, I didn't know this was, how can this still be an issue?
It is amazing, because really, do you know any women who have not experienced some kind of sexual harassment? I don't think I know one.
No, I would struggle to find, I would have to struggle to find somebody, I think, who wasn't somehow impacted by sexual harassment.
Or even gender bias.
Yeah.
Nobody. So that so many men are shocked is really kind of funny.
Yeah, so I think one of the good things is that there was a little bit of a wake-up call where all of these, not all men, but I think that there are some men who maybe weren't as aware that are now aware and will do their part to be more supportive and more, push to make sure that it doesn't happen in the workplace again. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just want, it'd be great if we had women and if we had parity. That's all I want.
Yeah, let's just get there so we can quit talking about it already.
Yeah.
And we just get on with the work.
Right.
So tell me this, what advice do you have for young women just starting out in their careers? What would you tell them?
Well, I think for me, one of the most important lessons that I've learned, and one of the most important things that I tell my daughter is to don't be afraid to fail, or more specifically, learn to fail and be okay with it. Because I think, for me, when I was practicing law, the first red flag was that I had gotten to the point where I was afraid to take risks, because if you do anything wrong in law, sort of the ultimate loss is loss of your license, loss of your reputation, loss of your license. And so I got afraid to be wrong at anything, and it just sort of permeated throughout my life. And I thought, okay, there is some negative consequence to this.
That can be paralyzing.
Yeah, and you're just not, I don't think growth or creativity or advancement or any improvement comes if you're afraid to take a risk, or if you're afraid you're going to fail. And so I started on this itty-bitty steps to fail. I went out, I sought ways to fail.
Like what?
Like I took a memoir writing class just because I knew it's something I'm going to be bad at. It's kind of scary. I have to write stuff and read it in front of people. I started running, and then that running transferred into CrossFit, or I should say I started running long distances. And then I started CrossFit, and I started trying things like, okay, I'll try and do a pull-up. I'll try and climb a rope. I'll try and do a muscle-up. Like whatever the thing is that I was pretty sure I would fail. And I just went through this ongoing forcing myself to do things that I thought would result in imminent failure. And what came out of that is that I learned it's not that big of a deal if I fail. So I try and do a muscle-up and look like an idiot. Not a big deal. Or I find out, oh, I'm really close to being able to do that muscle up, or, oh my God, I could climb that rope and I had no idea. And so getting really comfortable with that put me in a position that ultimately when I figured out, okay, I'm going to try and do this producer thing, all of the, are you crazy? This is going to be catastrophic failure. It wasn't super scary to me.
So you're like, I can do it.
Yeah, I thought, okay, and I named my business Tuck and Roll because that, that's sort of the easiest. When I was trail running, that was always my joke, how I got down the mountain. It's sort of how you get into the hard things. And so I think if you're afraid to fail, looking for opportunities to fail and know that it's okay. And then, I guess maybe I am saying do crazy stuff, because I did try and produce a movie with zero skills and zero network in this industry.
And that was insane.
But it was, I felt like it was mitigated risk, because when it came down to it, I did have the core skills, so it didn't seem that crazy when I charted out what the skills are. I had those. I just didn't have the industry knowledge, and I tried to do the research. But that taking that calculated risk and trying to push yourself a little bit harder, I think is a great tool that you can use in any career or in any stage of your life.
I think that's really smart, and I think we need to especially condition our girls more to not be afraid to fail and to go for it.
It's just, I feel like I see it a lot in the practice of law, and I'm still active because I do pro bono work, and I have a mentoring organization. I'm active in a attorney mentoring organization, and you see these women that are high performers, top of the class at law school. They come in, and then somehow they get beaten down to the point where they're not valued, or they're not valuing themselves as much. And I think, like, okay, this is crazy. You were valedictorian at Ivy League school. You were top of your class. You got this. Like, there's no reason you can't go out and do this. But I think when you get afraid to fail, it just gets scarier and scarier, and you stop taking this risk.
I don't know what to say to that other than we got to stop doing it.
Yeah, and with kids on sports teams, I think sports are good for kids because you're constantly being pushed to do that. But at least with my kids, I notice my son is more inclined to push it a little bit more. And my daughter still is too. She's young, but I see with some of the older kids, or when I coach girls on the run, I see they start to back away from it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And I'm like, no, you just got to go for it.
We got to keep pushing.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me this. Are you a success?
I say yes.
Good for you.
Some days I don't always feel like it, but I look at the overall trajectory and I say yes.
Good. Are you a badass?
Okay, this I have a little bit more trouble with because I think there's some connotation of somebody that's a little bit tougher than I am. But I don't know. The first time we talked, I think I said no. This time I think I'll say yes.
Okay. Embracing the badass.
I try to be a badass. I might fail, but I'm going to try.
Good. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, you know what? With that CEO, one of the other things I like to say is, especially to women, is don't give away your power. That 80% purchase decisions are made by women. Like, if you feel entirely powerless, just remember what you buy is power. Where you buy your coffee, or, where you go to lunch, or even these small decisions is power. And you can put the coffee money in the hands of a small locally owned business, or, if you're giving a gift, try and give it from a women-led business. All of those sorts of things, I think, help shift the paradigm a little bit. And that, even if you feel powerless, you still have some power. Don't overlook it and forget. Don't give it away.
For sure. We have so much buying power. If we would just get organized about it, it could really change the world.
Yeah. So I think those smidgen improvements will help.
And everyone should go see Magnum Opus.
Thank you. Yes, please see Magnum Opus. Please download it or check it out on Amazon Prime after the 9th.
Okay, I will link to it on my website. And do you have a website that I could link to?
I will send you the links. I have magnumopusmovie.com. And then we have our at Magnum Opus Movie on Facebook and Twitter, and Magnum Opus Movie on Instagram.
Okay, so people can follow you all of those places.
Yes.
Okay.
I would love that. I say every time we get a follower or share, an attorney saves her soul.
Perfect. Well, Amanda Upson, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Amanda Upson for sharing her story, and special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbay, and now on iHeartRadio, and subscribe and leave a review, and of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, the merchandise, the blog, and now we're also on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.